Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. If you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, we would love you to, and you can do so by signing up at patreon.com/the History Network. Thanks to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, season 35, episode 2, William Johnston, part 2. This episode was written by Murray Darm. Murray is an ancient medieval military historian from New Zealand living in Australia. He has written more than 100 articles on various aspects of ancient and medieval military history, as well as other historical topics from all periods, ranging from the history of opera to the runic alphabet and recipients of the Victoria Cross. He is the author of Macedonian Phalangite versus Persian Warrior, Athenian Hoplite versus Spartan Hoplite, and Leuctra 371 BC, all from Osprey Publishing. He is a regular on the Ancient Warfare podcast, as well as a regular writer for us here. Lieutenant Bythesea and leading Stoker Johnstone's action was one of the first gazetted for the award of the Victoria Cross in the London Gazette on February 24, 1857. Indeed, theirs are only the second action by date, Midshipman Charles D. Lucas's action on June 21, 1854, occurring first. Since the London Gazette listed recipients by rank, service, and even theatre, however, their action was actually listed 22nd and 23rd. Lucas's coming in even later, immediately after Johnston's, since, as a stoker, Johnston outranked Lucas, who was only a midshipman. When the inaugural investiture for the Victoria Cross was held in Hyde Park on June 26, 1857, many of those who were gazetted were already on active service elsewhere, especially since the Indian Mutiny had broken out earlier that year in May. Those men on service elsewhere had their medals sent to their new posts, and only 63 men were inaugurated in person in London on that June day. Awards were presented by priority of arm, so Navy before Army, today the other arms follow those, and then by rank. Date of commission would decide which man of the same rank would be presented their medal first. Medals were also awarded by the rank held at the time of the investiture, not the rank at which the medal was awarded. Commander John Bythesea was the second man to actually be presented with his medal by Queen Victoria, after Commander Henry Raby, who had been promoted to commander first, even though his action had taken place at Sevastopol in June 1855. John William Johnston was one of those not present at the inaugural investiture in June 1857, already being on duty in the Caribbean as part of the Jamaican division of the North American and West Indies station aboard HMS Brunswick. His medal is recorded as dispatched via registered post, one of the very few so dispensed in the history of the award. At the time of the investiture, Johnston was serving as a cook on HMS Brunswick. He died, seemingly without receiving his medal, of a self-inflicted wound on August 20th, 1857, cutting his own throat after an altercation where he attacked another sailor with a knife. One story of his death is reported as that, after he had attacked another sailor with a knife, he was confronted by several other men, and that he then took his own life in that moment with the same knife. He was buried at sea in the St. Vincent Passage in the West Indies. There are several issues with such a story, however. Other Victoria Cross recipients in the West Indies, who were also part of the Jamaica division, were invested with their medals in early August 1857. Hugh Rowlands in Barbados on August 5th, and Ambrose Madden in Jamaica on August 7th. The close proximity of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where Johnston was buried at sea, to Barbados, where Rowlands received his medal, and the further distance to Jamaica, where Madden received his, make it more than likely that Johnston would have received his Victoria Cross at about the same time aboard HMS Brunswick, that is, between August 5th and 7th. It seems most likely, therefore, that Johnston had in fact received his Victoria Cross, perhaps as much as 2 weeks prior, at the time of his death on August 20th. And yet these are not how the circumstances of his death were reported. Another peculiarity is that both Rowlands and Madden had their Victoria Crosses presented to them by their commanding officers, only Johnston's was recorded as sent by registered post. Why details of Johnston's receipt of his Victoria Cross seem to have been obfuscated are themselves unclear, although it does seem as if some kind of deception is at play, perhaps in keeping with Johnston's recruitment, which also seems to involve some kind of deception. It is possible that the altercation which led to his death occurred after he had been presented with his Victoria Cross, but that the details have been muddied to remove the risk of bringing Johnston, and perhaps the Navy, into disrepute. One reason to suspect that this may have been the case is that Captain of the Brunswick was Hastings Yelverton, the captain under whom Johnston had performed his brave act, which led him to being awarded the Victoria Cross in 1854. Yelverton took over command of HMS Brunswick in December 1856, and presumably Johnston transferred to the new ship with him. The Crimean War ended before any action could be seen in the new ship, however. It is possible that any shame or infamy suffered by Johnston could have been keenly felt by Yelverton. What is more, if Johnston had been demoted to Stoker by the time of his investiture, looking after him and shielding him from negative publicity may have already occurred. A concrete reason that such an infamous act as attacking another sailor with a knife could have been felt strongly comes in the forfeiture clause of the Victoria Cross warrant. The 15th and final clause of the original 1857 warrant for the Victoria Cross states, "In order to make such additional provision as shall effectually preserve pure this most honourable distinction, it is ordained that if any person on whom such distinction shall be conferred, he be convicted of treason, cowardice, felony, or of any infamous crime, or he is accused of any such offence, and doth not after a reasonable time surrender himself to be tried for the same, his name shall forthwith be erased from the registry of individuals upon whom the said decoration shall have been conferred. It is hereby further declared that we, our heirs and successors, shall be the sole judges of the circumstances demanding such expulsion. Moreover, we shall at all times have power to restore such pensioners as may at any time have been expelled, both to the enjoyment of the decoration and pension." Although the first Victoria Cross recipient to forfeit their award only came in 1861, there seems to have been a real concern around the forfeiture clause from the start. One recipient, William Stanlake of the Coldstream Guards, who was due to receive his Victoria Cross at the inaugural investiture, was not present due to his being punished by his commanding officer for theft at the time of the investiture. Stanlake did not, however, forfeit his medal. To do so needed a discussion of the matter in Parliament. Most of the forfeitures seem to have involved serious crimes such as desertion or theft, one of embezzlement and one of bigamy, although it is worth noting that Stanlake's crime of theft was not considered enough for him to forfeit. Indeed, in the history of the Victoria Cross, only 8 recipients actually forfeited their awards, the last coming in 1908. Several other recipients of the Victoria Cross did fall on hard times subsequent to their award, however, and even committed the same crimes for which other recipients were punished with forfeiture for their medals. One example is Thomas Flynn, who was awarded the Victoria Cross as a 15-year-old drummer boy at Cawnpore in 1857. He later ended up in the workhouse, and Parliament actually debated increasing his pension. Each recipient received a £10 annuity. Parliament rejected the pension increase, concluding he would simply spend it on alcohol. Flynn had been tried 15 times for court-martial, and yet it was never discussed that he should forfeit his award. The matter of forfeitures changed forever in 1920 when King George V wrote to his private secretary that he believed that recipients of the Victoria Cross should never have the honour taken away from them. The King feels so strongly that, no matter the crime committed by anyone to whom the V.C. has been conferred, the decoration should not be forfeited. Even were a V.C. to be sentenced to be hanged for murder, he should be allowed to wear his V.C. on the scaffold. There has been no forfeiture since, despite the clause of the original warrant remaining in place. The Victoria Cross for Australia, instituted in 1991, the Victoria Cross for Canada, instituted in 1993, and the Victoria Cross for New Zealand, instituted in 1999, have all kept Clause 15 intact in their own warrants. Examining William Johnstone's case in this light, however, makes it possible that his actions aboard HMS Brunswick might have been thought sufficient to forfeit his Victoria Cross at the time, leading to shame for the Navy and personally for Captain Yelverton. For this to happen with one of the first medals ever awarded, and to one of the very first men awarded one, would no doubt have been highly embarrassing to say the least. One other forfeiture, Valentine Bambrick, who was convicted of assault in 1861, and Johnstone's crime was just as serious. There may have been added pressure and embarrassment since Johnstone and Bythesea's awards were presented at the very first investiture, and Johnstone and Bythesea's awards were prominent, being the second act of bravery recognised. Captain Yelverton, who had himself been appointed a Companion of the Order of the Bath in July 1855, as reward for his heroics in the Baltic, must have felt reflected glory in the actions of both Bythesea and Johnstone. Yet again, however, there may be complicating factors. It is unclear if Johnstone took his own life in the moments immediately following his assault on his fellow sailor, or at some later time. Other accounts of the incident state he took his life after he was interred in the brig following the assault. The discrepancy in dates between August 5th and 7th and the 20th, when he died, might suggest he was incarcerated for some time. This assumes that the incident with the other seamen came about soon after the award should have been presented. When Johnstone was confronted by other members of the crew after attacking his fellow sailor, the sense of infamy and shame that a recipient of the highest award for valour had fallen so low may have been brought up, and the shame may have played a part in Johnstone's decision to take his own life, whether immediately or after he was incarcerated. In Johnstone's case, the matter is complicated by the records which only state that his award was sent by registered post, and yet the other recipients, also on station in the West Indies in 1857, had received their medals on August 5th and 7th, as we've seen. That makes it more than likely that Johnstone had received his medal before August 20th. Perhaps, if we are allowed to speculate, the altercation which led to his taking of his own life took place after he had been presented with his medal, and perhaps it was the cause of the argument which arose. He was then under arrest and took his own life whilst in custody. Taking such conjecture one step further, the reasons for John William Johnstone's enlistment in the Royal Navy in the first place also remain clouded. It seems likely that he was Swedish rather than Hanoverian. His knowledge of Swedish as a prerequisite for the mission on Vardo Island would seem to secure that. His reasons for claiming to be a Hanoverian on his enlistment papers need to be explained. His requisite skills in carrying out the attack on the mail couriers on Vardo, despite being outnumbered by 5-2 and being armed with a single pistol, which Lieutenant Bythesea possessed, imply that Stoker Johnstone was good in a fight. We might therefore suggest that he had a history of temper and violence, something the events leading to his death imply, even though we have very little information to go on. Perhaps Johnston enlisted because his temper had gotten him into trouble in Stockholm or elsewhere in Sweden, and he saw enlistment in the Royal Navy as a means of escape from the consequences of some crime of temper then too. Again, the events leading to his death might be seen to support such a scenario. It may also be that William was a name adopted by John Johnston himself, itself an anglicised form of Johan Johansson, to further aid escape and avoid detection, since he enlisted as John Johnston. If the speculation that his name was in fact Johan Johansson, and the Navy enlistment clerk anglicised that to John Johnston, is correct, we may be at a dead end, since tracking records of men with such a common name in Sweden in the early 1850s would no doubt prove highly frustrating. John Bythesea went on to have a remarkable, if sometimes controversial, career, eventually rising to the rank of Rear Admiral. In 1872, however, as captain, he ran the battleship HMS Lord Clyde aground at Pantelleria in the Strait of Sicily. Lord Clyde, launched in 1864, and her sister ship HMS Lord Warden, were the heaviest wooden ships ever built by the Royal Navy, and were her fastest steaming wooden ships. Bythesea and his navigator were court-martialed and never went to sea again. Although Bythesea's career suffered when the Lord Clyde was sent for repairs, her hull was found to be rotten, and she was sold for scrap in 1875. She had been in reserve since 1868 and was only commissioned for Bythesea's command. Throughout her career she had been plagued with problems. He should have come due to be promoted to Rear Admiral in April 1877, but did not have the requisite 6 years' experience as a captain. He was therefore placed on the retired list with the rank of Rear Admiral. He was made a Companion of the Bath, C.B., and Companion of the Order of the Indian Empire, C.I.E., in 1878. Mystery and tragedy surrounded the story of John William Johnston in equal measure, and yet despite them, the valour of his deeds in August 1854 continued to shine. Johnston's Victoria Cross is held by the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. It was donated to the museum in 1858 as part of the Robert B. Honeyman Jr. collection, although how it came to be in his collection is a mystery all its own. Well, thanks again, Murray, for writing that excellent two-parter for us. If you would like to write a script for us, then drop us a line with your idea and we'll work on it with you. If you would like to suggest a subject that you think we haven't covered yet, then you can do that as well. It's info@thehistorynetwork.org for that. Thanks once again for listening. You've been listening to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast, written by Murray Darn, read by Nick Barker.